There's something powerful about the journey of leadership, the daily steps, the long-term vision, and everything we learn along the way. Welcome to Leadership Labs, where we explore these journeys with the incredible leaders of Aurora Public Schools. In each episode, we hear from those who are helping guide our district toward Destination APS, sharing their stories, their challenges, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Today, I'm joined by Bryan Gasior, principal of Aurora Frontier P-8, one of our highest performing schools, coming off their strongest year yet. Bryan's here to share his path to Frontier, his transition from secondary to P8 leadership, and what drives him, including his passion for music that literally lines the shelves of his office. Bryan, welcome to Leadership Labs.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then also what makes Aurora Frontier so special.
Sure. This is my 7th year at Aurora Frontier. A little bit about me. I was born on the East Coast. So I have a little bit of that in me. Every once in a while it comes out and I have to kind of put it in my back pocket and hide it. But, you know, I've been out here since 1993. I'll talk a little bit more about my leadership journey and how I got here. I love exploring new hobbies. My wife kind of jokes with me, what's the next hobby I'm going to get involved in? But I think it keeps my brain moving, idle hands and all that. So I like learning new things, and I think doing those things through hobbies helps. And in terms of Aurora Frontier and what makes it special, people often ask, what are you guys doing over there, and how are you, consistently being in that performance band? And I think it's a testament to the culture that was established prior to me getting there. 20 years ago, this is our 20th year. So when we opened the doors 20 years ago, we still have a handful of staff members who did help open the building. Since my time there, we probably retired 5 or 6 others that helped open the building. So just that culture of what it means to be a student at Frontier, what it means to be a staff member at Frontier. They pride themselves on the hard work and dedication that they bring to the table every day. Our community supports the work that we do. So whenever we have to pick up the phone and maybe make a little phone call, the parents are, I would say 95%, behind us. And I think all of that, that cultural piece allows us to do the work that, we get up every morning to do. So I think that's what makes us special, that culture, that community, the dedicated staff. So it was easy for me to slide in there 7 years ago and find myself, where do I fit within this culture? So yeah, I'm real happy. I was really fortunate, as that was my first principalship, as of right now, my only principalship, right? But yeah, I was fortunate to land there. So
awesome.
Yeah.
There's I don't think you know this about me, but I know this about you. I because you're a New Englander, I think you're from Connecticut, and I like you because of that. My wife is from New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
So we have
best pizza.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
Best pizza on the planet.
Where do you go? Are you a Pepe's guy?
Oh, Pepe's. Yeah, Pepe.
We're a modern pizza family.
Modern's good. I mean, modern's good.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch Dave Portnoy,
that's right,
and his one bite
reviews.
That's
right.
I think he had modern as the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the Sally's.
That's right.
Family down there,
yeah.
Which offshoot of Pepe's.
Yeah.
But then you got Louis' Lunch too. Down there, have you eaten there?
I've only had modern.
Okay,
because my wife's family is it's kind of a cold sort of, you got to pick sides.
You do,
and they're a modern family, and so I've only ever had modern.
Well, Louis' Lunch is they have the first mention of the hamburger in the
I think I've heard of
Congressional Library. It's this little shack, kind of around where Yale is. Next time you're there, go to Louis' Lunch. It's a little hole in the wall, but good burgers. They're cooked really unique. They're put on this vertical broiler, so all the grease drips this way, and there's no ketchup in the place. So I don't even think of asking for that. And then they put it on white bread. So yeah, try Louis' Lunch.
Will do, man. Yeah. Thank you. I have to start with, I don't know, many people may not know about you. You're a serious music collector, I've had the honor of borrowing some records from your office, and uh, I like to pride myself in having a pretty mean pin game, and sometimes there some messaging there, some values that are communicated. I'm wearing an Aurora Public Schools pin today that Garrett gave to us at the principal celebration last year. But not a lot of people have commented on my Wu-Tang pin, but you did.
Yeah.
We had the chance, the superintendent and I, to visit Frontier on the first day of kindergarten last year, and you commented, "Hey, happy Wu-Tang Wednesday."
It was Woo Wednesday.
And I remember leaving, and I told Mike, "Brian's really cool." You know why? And he was like surprised what I said, but it was, not everybody comments on that. And so, relatedly, how did music become such a big part of your life?
Um, I think it happened, it's one of those things where, you kind of hear music playing when you're a kid. My mom was, I mean, still is, my mom's still around. She was a singer in a group called Sweet Adelines, right? So it's this like, and then within the chorus, there's quartets. So like basically a barbershop quartet. So she would always be humming, singing, right? A song would come on the radio, and she would just, even if she didn't know the song, she would just hum along. I remember I put a Grateful Dead tape in once in high school, and she probably didn't know the lyrics, but she was just sitting there humming along. I actually texted her this morning, and
Oh,
my
yes.
first concert experience was John Denver,
Wow.
right, at the New Haven Coliseum.
Country Road.
Which I don't think is any. So it's funny because she was, yeah, you fell asleep during the concert, but you made us. You said, hey, if I fall asleep, I want you to wake me up for Thank God I'm a Country Boy, right? That song, because I used to love the part where it's like sun coming up, I got cakes on the griddle. Life ain't nothing but a funny, funny riddle. Thank God I'm a country boy. Now, granted, I wasn't a country boy, but my mom and dad took me, and she was like, "What did we do with your brother?" I'm like, "I don't know. I was 6, So that was my first concert experience. My mom had a love of music. She saw Janis Joplin back in the day, Elton John in his heyday. And I think her singing as well just kind of like got me into the music thing. And I used to play music at night to help me like fall asleep, which I still do. Every night I open my phone up. I find something I want to listen to. I usually put it on so it's right in the background, and it kind of tunes my brain out so I can like shut that off and kind of fall asleep. And then I think as I got older, music, regardless of the type of music you like music for the same reason as everybody else that likes it, right? But when you're at spaces at a show, right, you're all collectively there feeding off that same energy. And I think when I was in high school, where we try to find ourselves, and where we might, be in connectedness. I went to my first Grateful Dead concert, in 1990, and I'd listened to them a bunch, and me and some friends drove down to Giant Stadium. And just the energy in that space, and you could be whoever you wanted to be in that space, and nobody really cared, right? You were there for the music.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for all the other genres of music that I've gone to. Like live music is, I just love being there and tapping into that energy. Your worries go away, your fears go away, and it's you and the music, and it feeds your soul.
Yes.
So that's why and where and how. I mean, we could sit here and talk the rest of the hour about that. But there's just something special about music, and those of us that really love it, right? We understand like that it gives us and feeds us something when we're hungry, right? When we need it. So
we're going to talk a little bit more about music here shortly, but tell us, you came from a secondary background, and Frontier is your first elementary experience. It's a P-8, but the elementary side is your first elementary experience. Tell us what drew you to education initially, and then tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a school leader.
Sure. So when I left high school, I went to a business school, Bryant College, It's now Bryant University in Rhode Island. My junior and senior year in high school, I was taking, like accounting classes and statistics classes, and I had an aptitude for math, even though I loved reading and writing, and that's eventually what I got my degree in. I scored well on the SATs. So I got into the business school. I went there for 2 years, and granted, leaving and being on your own, there's challenges there with the experience of college versus going there and solely focusing on academics. So I was joking with my mom on the way over here about that as well, because we're bringing my stepdaughter Karis is senior this year, so she's exploring colleges, and we've been doing college visits. And I didn't do well, and they gave me the ultimatum and said, hey, you got to figure this out on your own. We're not paying anymore. So it was 1993 when I jumped on a Greyhound bus, and it was a 50-hour trip out here to Colorado. One of my hometown friends was home for the summer, and he was a Johnson and Wales graduate from the one in Rhode Island, not the one that closed down here. So the original Johnson and Wales. Started cooking out there. He happened to be home, said one of my roommates is leaving. And I'm like, I'm coming out, right? So $100, bought the Greyhound bus ticket. My parents dropped me off at the bus station. 50 hours later, I landed up in Summit County.
Oh, wow.
I lived up there for 4 years, was exploring, traveled a lot, went on DED tour, when I could afford it. Before Jerry passed in 95. And I met a girl there, and she had also not really gone, or she may have done like a year or two of college. And we were like, well, let's go back. Like let's look around, and maybe we want to go back. So we moved from Frisco, Colorado down to Durango. And I didn't know what path I wanted to take. I was interested in history, but I also was interested in literature. I always, I lived in San Francisco for a while during that weird off period of not being in school. And I would go to Golden Gate Park, and I would, write poetry and listen to people sitting there banging their bongos, and, San Fran, right? It has its own uniqueness to it, where you could pretty much be whoever you wanted to be. So I ended up taking 2 courses, one of them being a survey of American literature. And the professor in that classroom really instilled in me my love and passion for reading and what reading does. I think reading literature also can feed your soul, just like music does. My wife is an avid reader, and I think like she finds that escape in books. So I that was rekindled in me, and so I was going to be an English major, and then there was an opportunity to one of my professors said, hey, I don't know if any of you are interested, but there's this summer program where first generation college students come to Fort Lewis, and they do like a college type class, and it's taught by college students. So if any of you are interested in doing this, let me know. It was a 4-week program. The majority of the students were Native American. There's a big contingency of Native American tribes down there. And it was just one of those things where it felt right, So I was in there, it was me and one of my classmates teaching the class. And after we were done, like probably with the first week, I went and talked to my advisor, and I was like, what do I do to maybe like get into the education program? And she was like, you pretty much have enough credits right now where you could easily slide in there and still be on track to graduate when you want to graduate. So I did that. All the while I was paying for college myself. I was working roughly 45, 50 hours a week at a restaurant. I have about 18 years of restaurant experience. Wow. So I do a ton of cooking. And that helped. You could do that job anywhere. I started when I moved out here working in the restaurants in Summit County. So when it came time to do my student teaching, they didn't want me to work. And I said, well, who's paying for stuff?
Right.
Are you going to pay? And they're like, well, it's a lot of work. You're basically going to be doing the job of a teacher. And maybe you can do 20 hours a week. And I was just like, I can't afford to do that. So my advisor looked over my credits and said, you know what, you could graduate right now with your English degree, and you could, maybe, move up to Denver or another metropolitan area, and they'll hire you and do the non-traditional licensure program. So you'll get paid as a teacher, and you'll also get your teaching credential doing it that way. So I moved up to the Denver metro area in 2001. I started applying to a bunch of schools. It was kind of later in the hiring season, so I ended up getting a job in a restaurant while I was still exploring, trying to get a teaching job. I ended up interviewing in March for a school in Brighton, and the principal called me in, and he's like, he hires me, and I was like, sweet, call my mom, hey, I got my first teaching job. I started that next school year, and yeah, and that's what I've been doing ever since. It was funny, the first staff meeting we had, he sits me down, and I've been shaving my head since 1995. So I sit down, and he introduces me, and he's like, yeah, and I think he's going to intimidate those middle school kids. And I'm like, that's why he hired me. He hired me because of how I appear. But he laughed, and I laughed, and so I did 2 years out in Brighton.
At VCon or Overland?
It was a charter.
Neither? Oh, okay.
It was a charter. So, I was doing a lot of the charter work because some of the public schools, because I didn't have the
The
license,
licensure.
if there was someone who they could hire who had the credential, then HR was obviously pushing them to hire the credentialed individual over me. So I did 2 years teaching middle school, and those were some hard years. Seventh grade. I figured if I can do that, I can do anything.
That's right.
Hormones changing and all that. So I did that for 2 years. My second year, someone was going to an English teacher in high school was going to retire. So the principal came down and said, I know you've been wanting high school. Are you still interested in that? We're so-and-so's leaving. And I said, yeah, absolutely. About a month later, he came back down and said, he's staying. His wife was diagnosed with cancer. He needed the health insurance to cover all that. And he's like, I know we talked about getting you into high school. So if you need to take time off to go to these job fairs, like, we'll support you in that. Because I know that's where you want to go. You want to go to high school. So there was a job fair up at Fort Collins. I went up there, and, with my resume in hand, and that was the time when you're competing against 40, 50 other English teachers to try to get a job. And I was going around and, putting my name on, finding the time. It was towards the end of the day, and I was a little late to, I want to say it was Cherry Creek. And the guy at the table was not very nice because I was just a little late, and basically said, no, like, you're 3 minutes past your time. So I was a little put off by that. I turn around and I'm walking, and I see this gentleman at a table all by himself. And it's Ernie Guarini, who was an assistant principal at Aurora Central High School.
Oh, wow.
And I looked and I said, do you have a minute? And he's like, well, yeah. So I sit down and we start talking. He has his interview questions in front of him. And then about maybe a question or two in, he stops the interview and he says, I'm not going to ask you questions anymore. Like, I just want to talk. So we basically talked for a good 45 minutes. And he said, I like the vibe I'm getting from you. And he said, I'd love for you to come to Central, kind of meet the department, observe some classrooms. And if it's something that you feel that you're a fit for, then we could do the interview, right? Like a real interview process. And I said, cool. So I talked to my boss. I said, can I take this day off? I'm going to go down there and I'm going to spend some time. And so I showed up, I observed what was happening. I met the department. At the time, Garrett Rosa was a part of that. Janice Rosa was there. Let's see who else. There's still people that, Heather Price. She's worked. I think she's still at Vista Peak. So there were a fair amount of people that are still here in this district, either still teaching or in a leadership role, that I kind of worked with. So I did that. Got interviewed. got the job. I worked there for a little over 4 years. My father passed away at the end of that time, and I had been out here for a long time. I had lost 3 relatives, all on my mom's side, within an 18-month period. And I was planning on moving back when my father got sick. But he passed away prior to that. 6 months after he was diagnosed with cancer,
Wow.
he passed. So, there was like something pulling me back. So I did leave. I went back to Connecticut. I bought a bar and grill,
Wow.
a neighborhood bar and grill with a high school friend. I did that for about 2 years. It didn't work out, the partnership. And I never felt like I belonged in Connecticut again, right? Like all my friends were older. I've experienced a lot of things, traveling and all of that. So I never felt I belonged. So coming back in teaching was something. I did get a teaching job there. The last 6 months in Connecticut. I applied for schools out here. I interviewed for Gateway. Funny story, my wife was on the receiving end of that phone call.
Wow.
And we didn't know that until I was like, "You worked at Gateway? Like, do you remember interviewing a guy?" I go, "That was me." So Garrett was one of my references. He calls me and goes, "Why is Gateway calling me?" And I said, "Well, I'm moving back, and I want to get back into the classroom. Like that's where I belong." So he's like, "I can't interview you, but we're filling spots. We have a new school. We're opening it year 1. We're doing this balance of new staff, veteran staff. I think you'd be a pretty good fit, but I can't interview you because of our relationship. So I'm going to have one of the other directors, Dr. Marisol Enriquez, I think was her last name."
Mm-hmm.
So my brother, myself, and 4 of our friends were riding our motorcycles up to Laconia that weekend. And I'm like, "Guys, we got to pull over at like 10. So like 10 o'clock, we pull off the highway, right? And they're sitting there on their bikes, and I'm answering interview questions on the phone.
Yeah.
I got a phone call later that day from Garrett, who wants you on the team. So I accepted that position. I moved out here probably 2 months later. I did a year at Vista Peak. That was when budget cuts were hitting a little bit, and Craig Lyle was there at the time. He was one of the other directors, and he's like, "Hey, I got to have a meeting with you at some point." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." About a week later, he's like, "Hey, like I really need to have a meeting at some point." I'm like, "Oh, why? Do I not have my job?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, actually, with budget cuts, because I was the last one hired in."
Wow.
And at that point, my tenure, it was 2 years, so I didn't really have tenure anymore. And they, last in, first out. So I was a little kind of, stressed a little bit. I had a conversation with Garrett. Garrett said, "Can you give me 2 weeks so I can figure this out? Like, I don't want to lose you. You'll get snatched up somewhere. So give me 2 weeks to try to figure this all out." I said, "Absolutely, I'll give you 2 weeks." So 2 weeks ended, and he's like, "I still don't have an answer on the budget, and what like we might have to take an overage from somewhere." He's like, "So as a friend and a leader, you do what you have to do." So there was a position for an instructional coach in the district. They used to bring folks into my classroom to kind of observe what was going on. And I had a friend who was in there, Julie McEldowney. I believe she's at Vista Peak in their CLDE program. And Dana Nardello, or Dana Tucker. So Caleb Tucker's wife was Dana Nardello. She was a teacher, coach at the time as well. And they're like, "Yeah, you should apply. We think you'd be good." So I went through the interview process, and then what they did was those that they felt would be a good fit, they brought us all to the PLCC for this big kind of thing, and to see if we liked it. So they bring us in, and I get a call from Garrett, and he's like, "I figured it out. Like, we can keep you." And I'm like, "Well, I'm here right now. Like, I might want to explore this. So like, let me figure this out. We'll talk." So after that, I was like, I think this is what I might want to explore. Like leveraging my voice as an instructional coach. So I had a conversation with Garrett, and he was like, "As both your leader and your friend, I think this is a good step for you. And I think you might want to consider, maybe looking at getting your principal's license," which was something I'd never considered.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a lot of folks, never really think, leadership is where they want to land. So I was a coach for a few years. Within that time, I created my own little niche within that. I did some video coaching work where, I would video people, and then I got enrolled at DU with their principal program. I did that. Got out of being the instructional role. I got an interview at Rangeview High School for their assistant principal position after the 3 years of coaching. And I got offered that position shortly thereafter. That was the only building that had an opening at the time. So I jumped at it. It was super close to my house, and it just kind of it made sense to me. So I put 5 years worth of my time and energy into Rangeview. Learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. And so in terms of the elementary space, um, I was applying to principal positions, uh, with very real intentionality at first. And then, when you get kicked around sometimes, when the pool gets shallower, and the talent is really visible, I really then started looking at the feedback I was receiving and then where I might fit in a system. Um, so I started to consider, the elementary space for two reasons. One was a professional reason to stretch myself,
Yeah.
To grow as a learner. And then I would also have a P-12 lens,
Yeah.
which a lot of principals, or even district leaders may or may not have. So I felt it was, there was some selfishness behind that. Like, hey, this might be fun. High school's difficult. The challenges that live in a high school, can really tug on you. So I touched base with Lori Peterson, who was at Arkansas. She was a principal at Hinckley when I was a coach supporting Hinckley. So she and I had a pretty good relationship. She taught me a lot about, when you become an AP, these are the things that you really need to consider and think through. You may disagree with what your principal's putting on the table, but you don't disagree in public, right?
Yeah.
You do those things behind closed doors. You advocate, right? Because there might be differing philosophies that you're having. So I reached out to her and said, hey, like, you were secondary. Like, what might I need to do? So she invited me over. My principal allowed me to go over there for a day. I went out to Murphy Creek as well. Lisa invited me out. And I just kind of spent some time in the elementary space. Um, those that those that know me and have seen me in social situations know that I gravitate towards the kids, right? Because the kids are fun. You can play with kids, right? Adults sometimes, it's like I work with adults. I really don't. Right? My dad was the same way. My dad would love being around kids. So I got into those schools. I explored that. A couple of district leaders reached out to me about a couple P-8s that were out. I interviewed for those. Some of the feedback was he didn't have the elementary experience. So when Frontier opened up, Casey Summers was one of the directors at the time. He called me and said, "Hey, an FYI, Carrie Roberts just let her staff know that she won't be returning next year. She's retiring. Are you interested in Frontier?" And I said, "I'll tell you what. You put my resume in front of the committee. If they look at my resume and if I'm one of the yeses, I'd be more than happy to show up and present myself. And if they felt that it was a fit, then then I'd be more than happy to come in and show them more." So he calls me a couple days later with the interview date, and I was deathly ill the night before the interview. I called Casey and I'm like, "What do I do?" And he's like, "Well, we can't switch this." So I show up. I had a fever of 104 that night, and I went through the interview process, and I said, "If I'm just saying anything that's not making sense, let me know, because I'm on like some Dayquil right now. I'm going to be sleeping here in a couple hours." So yeah, I was offered that position. I was in the running for a couple others, in the district, and I had told both Garrett and Casey if it comes down to a couple schools and Frontier's one of them, I'm going to say yes to Frontier.
That's great.
So they did. And yeah, it was a big learning curve, especially when COVID was my first year. But really immersing myself in that elementary space to understand what happens there. Pedagogy transcends content and grade level. there are specific things that happen in certain grade levels of content, but holistically, that lens of pedagogy that I honed as a coach really transferred into that elementary space. And I think putting the time and energy to learn, went a long way with the staff who, like, who is this guy and how is he going to show up in the elementary space? I think they learned real quick how I show up. I love high fives. I love knuckle bumps. I love hugs from kids. I love getting them going. Right. You can clown around with the kids and you can almost be a kid again. So they respect that. Getting in there and reading. So, yeah, the transition wasn't as hard as I anticipated. It was a learning curve. Making sure that I position myself and ask the right questions to fill those gaps.
Is there anything that you feel has changed about your leadership or how you've evolved since joining the full P-12 spectrum and being at Frontier now?
I think when I think back to when kids come in as freshmen, right? If you don't have either a middle school experience or you don't have an elementary experience, and you don't know what happens in some of those spaces, you fill those spaces, right, with your own assumptions as to what may happen. So now, like, we always look back and say, what I know now, what would I have done differently then, right? So, like, really looking at some of the fundamental things that happen, at the core of elementary, right? Like the initiative of third grade literacy, there's a reason for that, right? Like we close gaps between K and 3. The kids, the percentage of kids being, on track to be successful, right, is exponential, right? So I think in terms of my leadership style, I realized really quickly that at the high school level, if I'm hiring a position or if I'm making a change somewhere, I just go to that department. But in a smaller P-8 or in a space, I have to tell everybody, right? Because people were making these assumptions, like there was a position posted. Well, what's happening there? And I'm like, well, I went and talked to that team, and it's like, well, no, we need to tell everybody. Elementary teachers work really, really hard. Like those kindergarten, first grade teachers, I learned a lot about that. My wife's a teacher, so I'm always like, you want to, like, they're planning 4 preps and they're like herding cats down there. Right. But the way that I had to interact with high school teachers, it was just high school teachers. And the majority of high school teachers, in terms of how you have to approach conversations with them, it's very similar to how you approach conversations with high school students. Middle school, very similar, and the same. So it was like I had to adapt how I approach conversations with an elementary teacher or a middle school teacher, right? Because they the establishing purpose and like adult learning theory, right? So that was interesting, making those mistakes and being like, okay, I learned from that. I apologize. I will be more transparent with what's happening in these spaces. So, but that was a little bit of a learning curve for me, was just those differing approaches with adults.
All right, going back to the music connection here, and tying it into sort of your leadership story or style, how does music influence your leadership or connect to how you think about education?
Yeah. So when you kind of presented me with some of the, the theme here, and you were like, is that too much? I think I'll be working on some of the metaphors here, but you pushed me to think a little bit about the music piece and then, education and leadership. And I came back to like intentionally listening, right? Like when you're listening to an album, maybe for the first time, right? You're just listening to it, right? Just like when you read a book, right? Like you might just read it once and then I'm going to go back now and I'm going to read it with a little bit more intentionality. And just like the subtle nuances, right, within music, I think that translates to the subtle nuances of being a leader. I did take some notes, so I think how I listen to music is how I listen to adults, the students and the community. Musicians carefully plan how they want something to sound. Miles Davis, right, was very, very meticulous. James Brown, very, very meticulous, right? Like people would say, we would do 100 takes here, right? And then James would come out and be like, no, 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 it needs to do what I heard was no, it needs to do right. So like paying really, really close
Yes.
attention to what you're hearing, right? There's a difference between listening and intentionally listening, right? So I think those two pieces of what a musician does and creates, and the intentionality behind maybe the message that they want to put out in their music, whether it's the beat or the rhythm, if it's jazz, right? I think that transfers into leadership. So if I have something I want to do and create, right, and I don't bring people to the table and listen, right, then the sound won't work,
Yeah.
right? It won't be there. So I think in terms of how music influenced, right, me, I don't know. You pushed me in a space where I had to think about, is there is there that connection for me? And as I started thinking
There
about it, I was
is.
like, there is. And once I started, I was like, ah, right, and kind of thinking through some of those other pieces kind of made sense to me. So I think just a good leader listens,
Mhm.
and then takes what they hear and incorporate that into, if able, right? As a leader, we do have to make decisions,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes that they're hard ones, but I think if we made all decisions in isolation, then we're struggling. But we have to listen to what all of our stakeholders are saying, so we can take those things, put them in, right, like into a sheet music, and hopefully, right, what transpires and happens by the end is the vision that everyone had when we come together.
Absolutely. And on that note, what's the sound you're trying to create at Frontier?
Yep, you said that one there. Where do I have that? Was that
It was supposed to be
you gonna
right
edit that
before
a
that
little bit
one.
or no? Or is it all going in there?
Usually I'll go
Oh,
then.
oh, I got you. Yeah. So the you asked me the question of, what sound am I trying to create at Frontier? Um, I was thinking through a couple of different like music related terms. Harmony came out.
Mm.
Rhythm. Beats, and I landed on like melody, right? Something that's melodious, right? Now a melody takes, and when I was thinking through that, I thought more of a symphony, right? When you hear the violin start, right, and then you hear, maybe the cellos entering in,
Mm.
and then you hear some percussion in the background. So when you're in a building, you have multiple voices in that building, and you need to create the space for all of those voices to work together to create, right, this melody that sounds good. If there's something off,
Mm.
then you have to say, well, what is off, and how might we adjust whatever it is we're doing, whether it's an initiative in the building, or whether you're the conductor and you're listening and you hear that, you go over and you coach, the saxophone player on those things. So when you said what sound, am I trying to create at Aurora Frontier? I think it's how can we take the diverse students, the diverse community, the diverse teachers we have, so they all see themselves as part of this orchestra, right? And we're all here for the purpose. We're all here for the same reason. And how do we work together to create that melody?
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's a beautiful sound.
Love it.
So that's where my brain went when I thought of what am I trying to conduct,
Yeah.
create.
My wife hasn't allowed me to bring my records to work because it's part of our home vibe. And I guess I imagine that, at Frontier in your office, depending on maybe what you're working through or working on, or, you know, you might be working on your UIP. What record do you pull? Like, what's playing in the background as you're working through those challenges?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It depends on where I am mentally. Um, I find I usually try to have multiple genres in my office, that can help facilitate the mood. And if I'm in a good mood, I'm also playing music,
Yep.
right? So depending on where I am, what music allows me to do when I do, and the front office staff know, right? Like, if I shut
He's
my
playing
door,
Metallica.
yeah, let's leave him alone for a minute, right? I can turn my brain off, like I said before, right, about what got me into it. I can turn the brain off, and I can put the music on. I can tap into the music. The music centers me. Usually when we do those, like the SEL, type icebreakers and things like that, like those don't work for me, right?
Mhm.
What works for me is, I'll turn music on, I'll close my eyes, and then within that center of when I'm in the music, I begin processing. I don't know really how to explain it.
Yeah.
And then when I come out of that space, my head's clear. I have some semblance of a direction. Those that have ever worked with me know that I'm a very conceptual kind of thinker. So I have these ideas, and then through talking and listening to people, the ideas begin to kind of get smaller, and there a little bit more focus comes
Yeah.
into it. And I think music allows me to do that. It allows me to take the noise, whatever I might be frustrated with, whatever, that's more for the frustrated stuff, right? The happy stuff is when, like, I see things in the building,
Mm.
right? And I'm like, man, that was great, right?
Yes.
And I might go and I might throw, some P-Funk on,
Yeah.
and I'm now in that joyous space. But music for me is a good space for when I'm feeling frustrated. It helps me center and
Yes.
clear, and then I can now focus because I've gotten that out of my head.
Love it. Um, in the leadership playlist, I'm gonna ask you a little bit of a different question, but what albums or artists are in heavy rotation for you right now?
It's funny, right? When I drive into work, the day of the week, I sometimes flip the stations. I have Sirius, right? So you can go in and program. Um, so I'm a big jam band, right? The Grateful Dead played a huge role in my life
Yeah.
when I was trying to find myself. Like I said, you can go to those places that, you can go to a Dead show, and you could be whoever, you could be authentically you, right? And no one's really going to judge you in those spaces. And at that time in my life, right, that really meant something, and it still does. And I have my really core group of friends. It all did the same thing for us. So I have the Grateful Dead station, is usually in there all the time. Um, Thursdays is Smoky Soul Town. So as
Nice.
I was
Yeah.
out in the parking lot backing in, and I just kind of like sat there for 3 minutes, Ivan Neville came on,
Nice.
Tell It Like It Is, and I was just like, yeah. Fridays hip hop, so I put Rock the Bells on, right?
Nice.
And I'll listen to that. In my office, I'll go through. If I get a new record, I'll bring the new record in, and I'll throw that down. I try to pick up 2 or 3 a month, and I'll throw that, and I'll just immerse myself in that and try to figure out, is there a concept here, right? What are the
Yeah.
themes that come through? But I'm a huge Beastie Boys fan. There's always some Beastie Boys. What I'll do is I'll pull some out of my shelf, and I'll bring them to work, and I'll run through those at work. And then at home, in the home media area, I have records up there as well, where I'll go through those. So like Sturgill Simpson is in heavy rotation right now. Um, yeah, it depends on what I bought, but there are the go-tos that are always
Cool.
not too far out of hand's reach when I need something, when I'm missing something here. And I'm
Yes.
like, I need this today. I'm gonna go pop that bad boy on, spin it.
I'm curious about where you landed with your leadership playlist. 5 albums.
I did 6.
Oh, good. That
I
either
was
shaped your
struggling.
approach.
I was
Yeah.
struggling. It was hard, like
Yeah.
trying to find 5.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, how do I want to
Connect.
connect them,
Yeah.
right? Do I want albums with education type of things in the title, or is it more of a concept or the theme, and that's where I ended up landing, or
Yeah.
at least how I perceived some of these albums. And I kind of wanted to also make sure that I was picking some of the genres that like mean a little bit more to me.
Yeah.
So this is where I landed with, and I'll give a little, blurb about why. So I'm going to start with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
Cool.
If you listen, every song in there is driven by a theme, and it's the awareness of the human struggle. Mental health, burnout, stress, money, right? I mean, money and greed. And I think as a leader, we have to be aware of the humans. We're in a business that's human capital, from parents to students to adults. And if we're not recognizing the outside, impact of whatever might be happening in their lives, in our society today, then if we're not giving them the space to process those things, then they're not able to come in and do their job 100%, or at least 100% of what they're able to give that day. Right. So that's where Dark Side of the Moon landed for me.
Awesome.
I went with The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
Good.
By Lauryn Hill. I just think the authenticity that she puts out, the purpose that's within that album, and then just the overall emotional intelligence that lives not only within her, but also within her music.
Yeah.
I think as a leader, you lead with authenticity and purpose, and you also are able to access your emotional intelligence to connect back to the first album, right? Of understanding that we work with people, and how do we navigate people. I picked Legend by Bob Marley. I could have put any album in there by Bob Marley, because all of his albums have some sense of hope, strength, and calmness to them.
Yes.
Right. So I think a leader needs to create space where people feel that hope, and that there's also strength that they can rely on, but there's also that sense of calmness, because sometimes with strength can come maybe a sense of, I don't know if I can approach this person. And I know sometimes I have an appearance, right, which has served me well in some spaces where I'm not talking to that guy. My wife actually was like, I was intimidated by you at first. I didn't want anything to do with you. And I can't control this, right? But letting them know that, you can come to me with whatever you need. I think COVID was a good example of leading with hope and strength and calmness, because that was a very difficult time for everybody.
Yes.
I have What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. Just the idea of the empathy that lives within the album, and the fact that he took what he heard and saw and put it into music allows the listener to understand struggle, right? And I think as leaders, especially leaders in APS, everybody that comes into that building brings something with them. We don't necessarily know what it is. There may be traumatic experiences in their life. So being able to have the wherewithal, right, along with your emotional intelligence, to identify that people do have struggles in their life, and what are we doing to help pull them up?
Yes.
So that's where I landed with number 4. Number 5 is Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. I was going to go with Sketches of Spain, but I thought Sketches of Spain was a little bit too abstract and bending of the structure of jazz. Kind of Blue takes structure of jazz and then begins to blend it so it's structural right alongside flexibility, right? So I think with Miles Davis, right, he pushed the boundaries of jazz, right? And when he started to really go with it, it went out there and improv. And I think as a leader, you have to create some sense of structure, but within the structure, you can allow for flexibility, give some autonomy over his staff. So that's why I went with Miles Davis. And then the bonus one in there, which was always on my list because I was popping through, was Paul's Boutique by Beastie Boys.
Awesome.
When I first got Paul's Boutique, it was on cassette. And I remember popping it in the cassette deck. And I was like, what is this? Right? Like, I was expecting License to Ill 2, right? And I didn't get that. And it probably took me 3-4 years before I started listening to it again.
Wow.
And the brilliance of that album was was insane. The amount of sampling that they do, the intentionality with the sampling that they do. They sampled themselves, right? So in terms of leadership, I felt that every detail is meticulously thought through and matters, right? So the way they polished that album, and now I mean, it's probably on like, it's definitely in like a Rolling Stone,
Yeah.
right? But I think it took time for people to realize what they were doing,
Wow.
the innovation that went in to that album. It took a little bit of time for people to say, man, this is a masterpiece. So those, I cheated. I went with 6.
That's great.
I probably
That
could
was
have done
good.
10.
That's
But
good.
those were where I landed with some different genres, and how I
Cool.
might connect those themes to leadership.
All right. In our last quick section, the lightning round, what does Destination APS mean to you in the Aurora Frontier community?
I've been here for, I got here in 2004. So I've been here for 20 years. So it's always been, right, my destination.
Yes.
I think that those of us that invested our time and energy in APS understand the power and potential here. Not that it hasn't been here. I think it's tapping into that power and potential, and having our community be a part of that. So I think with our initiatives around, schools as community centers, the culture of belonging, I value that, because I think without that, what Frontier is doing wouldn't happen if we didn't have that. So tapping into that and creating those spaces, and that way those schools, those students, they feel connected. So in terms of destination APS, I've been here. I'm waiting for that to come right into APS, so we can, those of us that have been here can continue to celebrate the diversity that we serve, and honor that. There's a lot of great things happening in buildings across this district. So really making sure that we honor that and we showcase that. And I think since Mike and you got here, of just the social media presence of showcasing all these great things, it has gone a long way. So I've been here. I don't see myself going anywhere.
Good.
Right. So I've been here. So,
You've
but
arrived.
I do see, what's trying to happen, and
Good.
with the right pieces in place and that right direction and vision, I see us meeting those benchmarks.
Awesome. If Frontier's best year yet was an album, what would you title it?
So I was thinking through, and I came up with a little bit of a playoff of Jay-Z and Alicia Keys, A Frontier State of Mind.
Hey,
Right.
that's great.
I'm not a New York fan, right? Even though New York State of Mind,
Yeah.
the song there. But I think in terms of a state of mind, it's this collective culture, right, that focuses on very specific things, right? Our community holds us to a high level of standard. Our teachers hold the students to a high level of standard. And then I support the teachers in being accountable to those high levels of standards. So we're all working together to achieve what we've achieved. Last year, or this our last SPF was the highest we've had. And it's a testament to the Aurora Frontier State of Mind.
Yes.
New teachers, when they come in, they quickly say, like, wow, like these kids, right? They come in, and like, I don't have to ask them 4, 5, 6 times, and that happens in kindergarten, and it works its way all the way up through eighth grade. The parents expect that of us. They know what we're capable of doing.
Right.
And if they don't see something, they let us know.
Yeah.
And when we need something, they got our back, right? So we're all in this collective mindset. And our purpose, right, is supporting students. And Aurora Frontier State of Mind.
Cool.
And I had the theme song playing in the background as I was doing it.
Any last words of advice that you would offer to aspiring leaders out there?
I think it's to find your authentic leadership style, right? And don't compromise who you are as you're navigating your leadership journey. If you're true to yourself, you'll be true to those you serve. the assistant principals that I work with, through the mentorship program, I can't emphasize enough the listening component. When you really sit and listen, whether it's a parent, whether it's a student, whether it's a teacher in the room, if you're just really authentically listening to what they're telling you, you can act upon that. You can use that information that you hear to create an action plan alongside them. So I think it's be authentically yourself, listen, and be a part of that work, right? Alongside them. I always say, like, as a leader, you have to know when to lead from the front, lead from the side, right? Where I'm walking alongside you and leading from behind, right? And I think those are key points, because those things will build trust with your staff. Once you have built that level of trust with your staff, there's no telling what you can do, right? Because they're going to feel and see that purpose, and they're going to want to be a part of that work. So I would say that would be my advice to any of you out there. First year's AP principal, and just ask a ton of questions too.
Absolutely.
You don't know what you don't know. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the challenge of the musical metaphors.
Thanks for giving it to me.
And thank you for sharing some of your leadership journey with us, your passion for music with us, your ability to blend that secondary experience with elementary needs to create culture through intentionality, and to approach leadership with the same thoughtfulness you bring to curating a record collection has helped Frontier reach its highest heights thus far. And so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Join us next time as we continue exploring the paths of those who are helping guide us toward Destination APS. Until then, keep running your race with purpose and keep that soundtrack playing.